So hello and welcome to the next in WinMagic Speed webinar series. In this edition, we will be covering successfully securing data in pharma featuring Endo Pharmaceuticals. Before we get started to this afternoon, I just have a few logistics to get into before we begin. First of all, today's webinar will be recorded and a link will be delivered to your inbox as part of our thank you emails after today's presentation. This email usually goes out within about 24 hours. I'd like to encourage the audience to fill out the survey at the end of the webinar. Another note is that all gift cards, specifically Starbucks cards, will be provided to those that stay for the intended duration of the webinar. And again, this is only for external attendees. Please, we encourage all attendees, internal and external, please feel free to drop a few questions in the Q&A box below, and we will do our best to get to them. We'll get to them during the presentations, otherwise they will be delivered to you individually. And lastly, I'd like to introduce Rahul Kumar, our Vice President of Sales and Marketing, as he will be introducing your speakers today and moderating today's panel discussion. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Rahul.
Thank you, Graham, and thank you everyone for joining in. Again, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you guys are in different parts of the US and Canada. I think that's where majority of you are from. I do see one from Europe as well. So thank you for taking the time late in your day as well. Again, I'm glad to be here and having this conversation with you guys and presenting to you two of our panelists. One is Garry McCracken, who is our VP and CISO at WinMagic, and some of you in the earlier part of the series have seen Garry, and he's been talking on this. He's a regular feature on this webinar series. At the same time, Garry has been instrumental in developing of our existing and current solutions for the marketplace. Today we also have Paul Janiec who's a senior infrastructure engineer from Endo Pharma. He's from Endo Pharmaceuticals, one of our customers, and he's been using our technology for over 3 years, even though Endo Pharma has been a customer for over 12 years. So let's get started. And Paul, why don't we start with you, and why don't you give us an introduction of who you are, what are your responsibilities, and your experience in the field?
Yes. Hi. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me on the call and allowing me to share, my experience with SecureDoc. So as my title states, I'm currently on the Endo's infrastructure team. I'm a member of the Endo's end user computing team. We're currently responsible for all the corporate endpoints throughout all of Endo's enterprise. That of course includes, laptops, desktops, as well as any virtual workstations. We maintain and support all the endpoint infrastructure. And then of course, we're responsible for, the operating system on the devices, the encryption, any system updates, and then as well as any deployment of software to our end users. And of course, our main focus is the end user experience. I've been in the information technology field for about 15 years. I've had various roles and responsibilities.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for the introduction here. So why don't you tell us more about Endo Pharmaceutical, your employer here?
Sure. So Endo Pharmaceutical, we're a specialty pharmaceutical company. Endo provides a variety of pharmaceutical products throughout the different subdivisions that we have. We have a portfolio of branded products. We have a generics division that includes sterile injectables. And then we have a new endo aesthetics division that we just recently launched. We're a global company, presence in North America, Europe, and India. We have around actually over 3,000 employees around the world throughout all the different subdivisions, and that's growing. Our operations are basically, research and development, production and distribution of all our products, along with, your daily corporate activities. And then our mission is to help everyone we serve live their best life possible through the use of our therapies.
Thank you, Paul. And I'm really intrigued by the mission, and that's what drives companies, right? So it's great to have, great for you to state the mission of Endo Pharmaceutical to serve and help everybody in the health and wellness. And in today's time, it's all the more important. So let's dive into the topic here. What are the top security drivers and challenges for Endo Pharmaceutical?
Yeah, thank you for the question. We face, many similar challenges that organizations of our size face as well. Most importantly and mainly endpoint management and maintaining proper security posture, among other challenges. Within the past year, I would say the number one driver for our security, a driver and a security concern for us and for our IT infrastructure was the transition to a work from home environment, of course, due to the pandemic. The transition, it created challenges, in our IT environment. It kind of changed the makeup of the infrastructure itself. And, of course, we increased the number of our endpoints. So generally it's because our corporate employees, they generally use standard laptops, which have a VPN client on them. So those employees had no issues, connecting and working from home. However, we have other employees, some of the employees that are involved in manufacturing activities or support type job functions. Some of those employees use desktop workstations, and those desktop workstations don't even have a VPN client installed. So of course, that created a problem, and due to the work from home restrictions. So, the number, all those employees, we had to move them from desktops to laptops in order for them to be able to work from home. So, yeah, that's how the overall the number of endpoints increased, and we were forced to manage additional laptop devices, including security on those devices as we're mandated by a corporate level security team. In the long run, we're looking at possibly converting, some of our IT infrastructure to the cloud, but of course that's, a huge undertaking that's going to possibly, involve changes in our IT environment, and of course we'll have to work with our vendors, our security vendors, including WinMagic, to hopefully help us transition to some, to the cloud eventually.
Thank you, Paul, and I'm glad we could help, right? I mean, we saw this big upsurge at the beginning of the pandemic, which forced a lot of companies, or a majority of companies, starting to work from home, and that meant a lot of changes from desktop to laptops, like you mentioned. You also mentioned that you have a corporate IT security team, like any of the mid-sized large organization. Can you elaborate on their role within Endo?
Sure. So yeah, our IT security team, they establish and maintain our security posture and all the policies for, the IT environment across the whole organization. They set up any necessary procedures both for our employees and for our infrastructure across the whole company.
Hey, Paul, it's Garry here. Can you tell us about some of maybe the compliance drivers that you have in your industry?
Well, you probably would have to sit down with the security team to get into specifics, but at a high level, as far as compliance, due to the fact that we're a pharma, HIPAA and GDPR are definitely the things that we have to take into consideration. But as far as security, NIST, our IT security team, definitely looks at best practices and recommendations. And follow those. But I would say security threats, they drive our stance, our security, rather than compliance requirements. It's our goal is to protect our company from any possible data breach. That's basically the bottom line.
Thanks.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks, Garry, for chipping in there. What we also, and this is a common thread, right? What we are hearing from our other customers as well, is that they're increasingly becoming more and more aware of possible threats on the horizon, more so the IST, information security team that you talked about. What does this mean for you and your organization?
Yeah, I mean, as IT security evolves, so do the threats to any organization. So all IT managers should be aware of those, evolving forms of threats to any organization's data security. I think I touched on it a little bit earlier, but our IT security team is constantly monitoring for possible threats and updating, as needed. And then, of course, me working in conjunction with the security team, my team and myself were responsible for adhering to those policies that our security team sets. But they really help to maintain a company-wide alert stance on security through specific IT training. Some of these programs, I'm actually a lot of these programs, they're, company-wide trainings. And they include post-training evaluations that employees have to take to ensure that they adhere to these IT security guidelines. Recently, over the past 6 months to a year, some of the threats that we focused on are probably ransomware and phishing attacks. Those have been on the forefront of the recent policy updates. Phishing and phishing related attacks like, business email compromise, those have definitely been on the rise. So, for us, a focus on the implementation of multi-factor authentication whenever possible. Thankfully, we have not fallen victim to any of these threats, due to the proactive, environment that's maintained by our IT security team. This combined with all our security solutions has helped keep our IT infrastructure and our data at rest across our organization, in a good state.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And I think you did touch upon a lot of very good points in there, including the fact that there is phishing, there is business email compromise. And I was reading some report and I can't recall exactly, but phishing was possibly in last year, 6 times that of ransomware. I'm just trying to Google and I'm going to, if I find that link, I'll share that with everybody to consume. But let me bring in Garry here. And Garry is a security expert in-house. Garry, there are a lot of threats out there. What can you do to protect against phishing and business email compromise, for example?
Well, first reinforce the point about the business email compromise and phishing. There's the 2020 FBI Internet Crime Report came out a few weeks ago, and it's got some interesting stats. Business email compromise was the costliest, was the most costly, and they had about 19,000 complaints and 1.4 billion in losses. And I did the math on that, and that's about $93,000 per incident. And phishing scams were also way up there in terms of number of complaints, 241,000 phishing complaints. So phishing and business email, of course, along with ransomware, are really some of the hot topics today. Just the quote from the FBI report, what actually business email compromise is. They say, the scam is frequently carried out when a subject compromises legitimate business email accounts through social engineering or computer intrusion techniques to conduct unauthorized transfers of funds. So for example, you get an email from a legitimate email account redirecting you to put funds or wire money to a different or invalid bank account. The keywords here are legitimate business email accounts. Most people are pretty on to if they get an email from their boss at a Hotmail account, maybe they'd be suspicious, but if they get an email from a legitimate account, then they can easily fall prey. And there's a number of mitigations for that. I'd say the top technical mitigation is to use multi-factor authentication or passwordless login. Multi-factor can be 2-step, you type a password and then you do a second step on top of that, like one-time password. Unfortunately, even one-time password can be phished too. It's a little better than password, but it's still not completely secure. Passwordless login, for example, using a FIDO security key, really helps business email compromise, and also with some phishing. basically, it has built right into the protocol anti-phishing to protect you from authenticating to an invalid site. And now, okay, now technology is not everything. There's other things you can do. You can configure your, if you're using Outlook, stop things like auto forwarding outside of the domain. You can put manual procedures in place where that if you get a really large redirection of funds, maybe you should actually make a phone call. And then I think, as Paul mentioned, security awareness training, making sure that your users, your employees are aware of security and aware of the policies, because a lot of the times when there's a breach, it's because it's a employee not following the policy, and users are really the last line of defense.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Garry. And I think this is helpful. And while you were talking to us about what is the size or the size of the problem here, I also found data on, or third-party article on why is the numbers in which states that phishing is so much bigger, and in fact is the biggest challenge that customers face or organizations face today. So let me bring in Paul here. Paul, you have been working with us, like I said in the beginning, for over the past 3 years with WinMagic, and over, let's say, 3,000 to 5,000 licenses there. The organization, Endo Pharmaceutical, has been with us for well over 10 years, I think 12 years. What we are interested in is to understand how is it for you to work with us and in addressing your current environment and aspects within there.
Sure. So, personally, I've been working with SecureDoc, for the past 3 years. Endo Pharmaceutical as an organization has been, using data security solutions from WinMagic for about 12 years. Before I touch on SecureDoc, I just want to kind of give everybody, paint a picture of our IT environment for the audience. We have, over 3,000 employees. Our IT infrastructure is, it's quite complex. It's changing, it's growing, it's evolving. In addition to our endpoints, we of course have a server environment that's, centered around our Microsoft Windows operating system on the server side. With regards to, excuse me, as far as SecureDoc, we have about currently 3,500 licenses that are active, and then we have an additional 1,500 licenses ready for deployment across our infrastructure as our company is growing. The intended use case for most of the devices is to sustain constant endpoint security, leveraging SecureDoc's pre-boot authentication technology from a single console management solution.
Mm-hmm. So, and thanks, Paul, for that. So, I actually have to ask, for the benefit of the audience here, how are you utilizing SecureDoc and WinMagic in your enterprise, and what are the benefits do you see as a result of that?
Well, the main focus for use for SecureDoc in our IT infrastructure is endpoint encryption for the devices across all of Endo. With the possibility of theft or employees losing devices, it gives us peace of mind. Should either of those instances occur. SecureDoc's ease of use, I think, is essential, and makes a difficult situation much easier to manage. We've been able to successfully secure thousands of endpoints across our organization using SecureDoc. And its single pane of glass console that it provides, it makes my life and all the different admins across our organizations throughout all the subdivisions. It's easy. It easily organizes, and it allows for easy management throughout the infrastructure. All the endpoints are very easily managed and organized. To focus on endpoint encryption, we use the pre-boot authentication technology, specifically PBConnects, to secure all our endpoints. Basically, we use an Active Directory username and password, prior to pre-boot, from what I understood, earlier versions of this technology were a central point when we started working with WinMagic, 10 years ago, and then subsequent versions have been just as easy to manage and secure, if not better. As far as support, WinMagic's professional assistance, and then WinMagic's regular support teams, they allowed us to effectively deal with the challenges of maintaining security on a regular basis. The standard technical support, they provide regular support for us, if we need any kind of support on a regular basis. And then, the WinMagic professional services teams worked along, with my team and along with our IT security team to, tackle and architect, the organization's, problems.
Thanks, Paul. And you did talk about PB Connects. Garry, can you explain how does PB Connects work with AD authentication? I know this is technical, so I'm going to lean on you on that.
Sure. Thanks for the technical question. Well, first of all, with full disk encryption, even the Windows operating system's encryption is encrypted, and encryption goes hand in hand with authentication. The most secure thing to do, and sort of common sense thing to do, is to force an authentication before decrypting Windows and loading it into memory. But as I said before, Windows is encrypted at power on. So that's where pre-boot authentication comes into play. Pre-boot authentication code runs first, prompts the user for their username and password, their Active Directory username and password. Then the pre-boot code uses the network to connect to SecureDoc encryption server. And if this particular user is by policy allowed to access and boot that machine, then SecureDoc encryption server then checks with Active Directory, and Active Directory is the one that verifies the AD credentials. And if they're valid, then the key material is allowed to go back to the machine and it's allowed to boot up. So PB Connects is simply utilizing the network and an AD at pre-boot for authentication. The advantage of this approach is that users can be entirely managed in Active Directory, including leveraging the enterprise's existing Windows onboarding, offboarding, password reset processes, and everything like that. So that keeps costs down.
Thank you, Garry, and thank you for that perspective there. Paul, you mentioned previously that you, as well as the security team within Endo, are always looking for the future, right? Looking at the future. So can you outline for us what's on your horizon for the company from your team's perspective from a horizon standpoint for 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Definitely. Like I said before, our IT professionals, our IT security team, they're always keeping an eye on the future. I believe I touched on it, a little bit earlier, but we're looking at SaaS technology, multi-factor authentication, and then even, any deployments of passwordless authentication technology. Software as a service has, that's interested us because, the whole IT industry is definitely shifting to a cloud-based infrastructure. And so, we just need to be prepared. More and more companies are offering, only cloud-based services. So it's definitely a way to keep up with technology. As I stated before, multi-factor authentication as an endpoint security solution, that's a must. Helps us protect our company against, password-focused threats like, I mentioned earlier, like phishing or, business email compromised. And then, companies are committing to, multi-factor authentication requirements. So it's something that we need. It's something we're faced with, and we have to, keep up with multi-factor authentication as well as it becomes mandated. Passwordless authentication technology, very new, but that's kind of interested us, to look at passwordless login to improve endpoint security going forward, and then make that experience, easier for the end user.
Yep. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, and you touch upon very interesting points here from a MFA to passwordless. So let me ask Garry, and we're coming to the end of the session. So let me bring the last question for Garry. Garry, why does it make sense for organizations to manage encryption and remote authentication at the same time from one console?
Well, in short, it reduces IT operational costs, reduces attack surface, makes things simpler and more secure. But I think you got to look at what's going on under the covers to see why it makes sense technically and why you get those benefits. The core attributes of a good full disk encryption solution is transparently encrypting the machine with little or no impact on the user's daily life. And they probably don't even know that that's happening. And you can't see that happening. So you need a trusted supplier who knows their crypto, is using the right algorithms like AES, and those have been certified by third party, like for instance, CIPS 140 certification. And they've had a history of doing it right for many years. That said, encryption without authentication doesn't provide confidentiality. And as I mentioned before, so strong authentication at pre-boot before the data is encrypted is very important for security. Then there's key management and recovery for users, and enterprise reporting and setting a policy and reporting a policy. And in Endo's case, there's many different ways of doing it, but in Endo's case, they use PV Connects and Active Directory to make this all easy. So that's the one side, but then the other side is the core attributes of a good authentication for most systems, like for instance, the Salesforce in the cloud, or email systems. We touched upon business email compromised passwords are neither secure or a good user experience. And there have been some, attempts in the last few years to try to shore that up with SMS text, but that's actually on the restricted list in NIST now, or one-time password or other things, but those all have usability and security drawbacks. So what's the core of a good attribute of a good remote authentication? It's asymmetric crypto. So that's, without getting too many details, that's when there's a public and private key. The public key is shared on the server, and the private key is kept private on a piece of hardware, whether it's probably, for instance, by a trusted platform module on a computer, for example. So this is a core attribute of a good authentication system, because it doesn't matter if a public key gets stolen or breached on a website, because it's a public key. And then with authentication on the endpoint, as an encryption, there's still the need to manage policy and users and recovery. So there's a lot of commonality on the endpoint between full disk encryption and the authentication it comes with, and the authentication that you can leverage into the cloud. So with that commonality, all managed under one console, is where that's why you get that benefit of improved security and improved usability and reduced costs on an ongoing basis.
Thank you, Garry, and this clarifies a lot how these two solutions kind of gel in well together. So I think we are at the end of the conversation. We only have a minute and we have some questions. So let me take one in the interest of time, and the rest we will respond one-to-one. This is from an anonymous audience in here. They put it as anonymous, but anyways, they say we are considered as a medium-sized organization with a global presence and has locations spread across the world, much like Endo, I would say. Our challenge is that we have different types of endpoints with multiple operating systems. Do you have clients who have a similar type of infrastructure, and how you have addressed their security needs? Garry, you want to take that?
Well, yes, we do. And we didn't touch on it too much, but many of our customers have Windows, but a lot of them also have Mac, and maybe 10 or 20%, maybe the CEOs or the creative people use the Macs. And then we're also seeing Linux being used a lot, not only on servers, but on endpoints, a growing trend there. And well, we didn't mention it, but with the one SecureDoc console can manage all of those platforms equally well from servers to laptops, to Windows, to Linux, to the Mac. And so it's important to have a platform that's not one platform that can do all those things and not have 3 or 4 different platforms for each operating system.
Yeah. Thank you, Gary, and hope that answers that question. And again, we are at 2:30 Eastern. Thank you for joining us, and we really appreciate the time that you have taken. We'll come back again next month with another webinar. Let me also thank Paul for agreeing to have that, share his views. And Paul, this was very helpful. I'm sure the audience likes it too. Again, you guys have a good rest of the day. Hope this was interesting for you, and we'll keep bringing up good content for you to consume. Thank you. And
Thank you, Raul. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, everyone.